There's a kind of love that doesn't feel like love at all. It feels like longing, like uncertainty, like reaching for someone who always manages to slip through your fingers. You fall for them, not just for who they are, but for the moments when they let you in, when they're present, when their words make you feel special, when you catch glimpses of something real. But just as you start to believe in it, they disappear. Not completely, of course. They never fully leave. They just become distant, unavailable, harder to reach. And suddenly, you find yourself trapped in a heartbreaking cycle, craving closeness with someone who fears it. This is the truth about avoidant love and detachment. It's not that they don't feel, they do. Sometimes, even deeply. But the moment emotions become too real, too vulnerable, their instinct is to pull away. It's not a conscious decision. It's a defense mechanism. A shield built over years of learning that intimacy is dangerous, that attachment leads to pain, that love is something to be managed, not surrendered to. And if you've ever loved someone like this, you know the silent agony of it. You question yourself constantly. Did I say too much? Was I too needy? Did I push them away? You convince yourself that if you just love them the right way, if you're patient, if you give them space, if you prove that you're safe, they'll finally stay. But they won't. Not in the way you want them to. Because avoidant love isn't about you. It's about them. About their fear of being consumed by intimacy. About their need to feel in control. About their deep subconscious belief that distance is the only way to survive love. And the hardest part, they do care. They do miss you. They do feel the connection. But the closer they get, the stronger the urge to detach. And no matter how much you try to hold on, you can't love someone into feeling safe if they've spent their whole life running from it. This is the heartbreaking truth. Avoidant love isn't love that grows. It's love that keeps you longing. And yet, breaking free from it feels impossible. Loving someone who keeps pulling away isn't just painful, it's confusing. One moment, they're present, engaged, sharing a side of themselves that feels raw and real. And then, almost without warning, something shifts. Their warmth fades. Their presence becomes inconsistent. They seem distant, distracted, as if the connection that once felt effortless is now a burden they can't carry. And no matter how much you try to understand, no matter how patient you are, they keep slipping further away. But this isn't just a fear of commitment or a reluctance to settle down. It's something deeper, something rooted in a pattern they may not even be fully aware of. It's called avoidant attachment, and it's not a choice, it's a survival instinct. For most avoidants, this pattern didn't start in adulthood. It began long ago in childhood, when they learned that closeness comes with a cost. Maybe they reached for comfort and were met with distance. Maybe their emotions were dismissed, or love came with unspoken conditions. Somewhere along the way, they absorbed a painful lesson. Vulnerability is dangerous, attachment is unpredictable, and relying on others only leads to disappointment. So they adapted. They taught themselves to be self-sufficient, to suppress their needs, to equate emotional independence with safety. Over time, this became second nature. They built walls, not to hurt others, but to protect themselves. And those walls remain even when they fall in love. They do want connection. They do feel deeply. But the moment emotions become too intense, their defense mechanisms take over. They withdraw, convincing themselves they need space, that relationships feel suffocating, that they're just not as emotional as other people. If you ask them why they're pulling away, they might not even have an answer, only a vague sense that something about closeness makes them uneasy. And if you love someone like this, you feel it all. The closeness followed by the distance, the moments when they let you in, only to retreat again. The way they seem to almost open up, but never completely. And you try. You try to be patient, to show them they can trust you, to prove that love doesn't have to be something to fear. But no matter how much you give, no matter how much you reassure them, they still keep their guard up. Because avoidance isn't about you, it's about them. And until they recognize this cycle for what it is, they'll keep running from love, from intimacy, from the very thing they secretly crave the most. And that leaves you wondering, why does someone who longs for love fear it just as much? You feel it before you fully understand what's happening. The energy shifts. The warmth that once felt so effortless begins to fade. Their messages become shorter, their tone more distant. At first you tell yourself it's just stress, that they'll come back around, but deep down, something inside you knows you're losing them. Again, it doesn't make sense. Nothing happened. There was no fight, no harsh words, no obvious reason for them to pull away. And yet, here you are, standing in the same place, watching them disappear into themselves like they always do. You replay every conversation, searching for the moment you pushed too hard or got too close. But this isn't about something you did. This is about why avoidants detach in the first place. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, love is both a longing and a threat. They want intimacy, but the moment they feel it becoming real, something inside them panics. Closeness triggers old fears, fears they may not even be fully aware of. Because to them, attachment doesn't equal safety. It equals risk. The risk of losing themselves, the risk of being hurt, the risk of needing someone who might not always be there. And so they do the only thing that feels safe. They pull away. It's not always intentional. Sometimes they don't even realize they're doing it. All they know is that something feels off, that they suddenly need space, that the relationship has become too much. So, they create distance. Maybe they stop reaching out first. Maybe they keep conversations surface level. Maybe they avoid physical affection, or they start spending more time alone. And the cruelest part? Sometimes they don't even know why they're doing it. They just know they have to. But the most heartbreaking thing about avoidance isn't that they run. It's that many of them don't actually want to. They don't want to lose you. They don't want to sabotage their relationships. But emotional closeness activates something in them that tells them to escape before it's too late, before they get hurt, before they become dependent on something that could one day disappear. And that leaves you stuck in a painful cycle, watching someone you love push you away, even when you know deep down they don't really want to let go. Because the truth is, avoidants don't detach because they stop feeling. They detach because they feel too much. There's a certain kind of loneliness that comes from being next to someone who won't let you in. It's not the absence of love that hurts the most. It's the presence of something that feels almost like love, but never fully becomes it. It keeps you reaching, waiting, believing that if you just hold on a little longer, they'll finally let you in. But waiting has a cost. Over time, you start to feel like you're the only one fighting for the relationship. You second-guess your words, your actions, even your own emotions. You replay conversations, looking for the moment when things started to shift. You wonder if you were too much, if you asked for too much, if you became too much. And without realizing it, you begin to shrink yourself. You stop bringing up the things that matter to you. You pretend you're okay with the distance, even when it's tearing you apart. You learn to settle for breadcrumbs of affection, for brief moments of closeness, before they inevitably pull away again. This is what it means to love someone who is emotionally avoidant. The pain isn't just in the withdrawal, it's in the hope. The kind of hope that keeps you trapped in an endless cycle of almost connection. Just when you're ready to give up, they pull you back in with a rare moment of vulnerability, a fleeting glimpse of the love you so desperately want to believe in. And so, you stay. You rationalize their behavior. You tell yourself they do care, they just don't know how to show it. You convince yourself that if you're patient, if you're understanding, if you prove your worth, one day they'll feel safe enough to choose you fully. But what happens to you in the process? Loving an avoidant person can slowly erode your self-worth. It teaches you to doubt your needs, to silence your desires, to accept less than you deserve. You become addicted to the highs and numb to the lows, mistaking emotional unavailability for depth, mistaking inconsistency for passion. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to walk away. Because by then, you're not just fighting for the relationship. You're fighting to prove to yourself that your love wasn't wasted. But love is not meant to feel like chasing a ghost. And no matter how much you give, you cannot make someone ready to receive you. So the real question is, how much of yourself are you willing to lose waiting for someone to finally choose you? It's easy to assume they don't care, that their distance means indifference, that their silence means absence of feeling. But that's not the truth. Avoidants do feel love. They just experience it differently. To them, love is not warmth, it's pressure, not safety, but vulnerability, not connection, but something that threatens the independence they've spent a lifetime protecting. When they start to get close to someone, something inside them resists. It's not logical. It's not something they plan. It's a deeply ingrained response, a survival instinct they don't even fully understand. For most, this reaction was shaped long before they even knew what love was. Maybe they grew up in a home where emotions weren't welcomed. Maybe they learned that needing someone led to disappointment. Over time, they became self-sufficient, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. And as adults, that same self-protection follows them into their relationships. When they meet someone they truly care about, the desire for connection clashes with their need for control. At first, the relationship feels safe, until real intimacy starts to form. That's when the walls go up. They start to detach, not because they don't love, but because love makes them feel exposed. Their emotions are there, buried beneath layers of defense mechanisms, but they don't know how to express them. So instead of leaning in, they pull away. Instead of saying, "I miss you," they go silent. Instead of showing affection, they create distance. And the cruelest part? They often don't even know why they do it. They just feel an overwhelming need to escape. But their love isn't absent, it's just different. They show it in ways that aren't always obvious. Staying in a relationship longer than they intended, checking in on you even after they've pulled away, remembering small details you mentioned in passing. These moments might not seem like much, but for them, they're everything. Understanding how an avoidant experiences love doesn't mean excusing their behavior. It doesn't mean sacrificing your own needs just to accommodate theirs. But it does reveal one painful truth. They are not heartless, they are just afraid. And fear, when left unchecked, will always win. There's a question that lingers in the back of your mind, one you're almost afraid to ask. Can they change? Can someone who has spent their entire life running from closeness suddenly decide to stay? Can they unlearn the instinct to detach, to protect themselves, to keep love at arm's length? You want to believe the answer is yes, and in some ways it is. Avoidants can change. They can recognize their patterns. They can work through their fears. They can learn to embrace intimacy instead of fearing it. But that change doesn't happen the way you wish it would. It doesn't come from love alone. It doesn't happen because you were patient enough, understanding enough, strong enough to carry the relationship for both of you. They don't change because they realize your pain. They change when they finally recognize their own. For most avoidants, this realization doesn't happen in the middle of a relationship. As long as they have someone who adapts to their distance, who stays despite the inconsistency, they have no reason to confront their fears. They tell themselves they're fine the way they are, that they just need space, that love is supposed to feel this way. It's only when they lose something real, when they sit alone in the silence they once craved, that some of them finally begin to question themselves. When they start to wonder why they feel empty instead of free. Why the distance that once felt like control now feels like isolation. Why, despite pushing love away, they can't seem to forget the person who once offered it so freely. But even then, change isn't guaranteed, because growth is uncomfortable. It forces them to face the wounds they've spent a lifetime avoiding. And some won't do it. Some will keep running, convincing themselves that intimacy just isn't for them. So maybe the real question isn't can they change? Maybe the real question is, will they? And if they won't, how long are you willing to keep waiting? You've spent so much time waiting. Waiting for a breakthrough, for a moment of clarity, for them to finally look at you and say the words you've been desperate to hear. I'm ready. I choose you. I won't run this time. But how long can you keep waiting? Loving an avoidant person feels like living in a constant state of almost close enough, almost secure, almost the love you deserve, but never fully there. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to imagine a life without them, because walking away doesn't just mean losing them. It means letting go of the hope that they'll change. And that's the hardest part, because deep down, you believe in their potential. You've seen glimpses of who they could be if only they stopped running. And maybe they do love you in their own way. Maybe they want to stay but just can't. So you keep holding on, convincing yourself that if you just endure the bad days, the good days will make it all worth it. But at what cost? You tell yourself that love requires patience, that real connection takes time. But love isn't supposed to feel like you're constantly proving your worth. It isn't supposed to make you feel small, unseen, or unworthy of consistency. You deserve more than a love that keeps you guessing. You deserve someone who doesn't need to lose you to realize your value. So, should you stay or walk away? There's no universal answer. No one can tell you when enough is enough. But ask yourself this: are you happy? Not just in the rare moments when they let you in, not just in the fleeting highs before they pull away again. Are you truly, deeply happy? Or are you just attached to the idea of what this love could be? Because the truth is, you can't fix this for them. No matter how much love you give, no matter how much you prove your loyalty, you cannot make someone ready to love you. That choice has to be theirs. And if they're not willing to choose you fully, then maybe it's time for you to choose yourself. So the real question isn't should you stay, it's are you willing to keep losing yourself in the hope that one day they'll find themselves? You don't wake up one day suddenly healed. It doesn't happen all at once like flipping a switch. At first, it just feels like silence, the absence of something that once consumed your every thought. The space they used to occupy in your mind is still there, but it's quieter now, and that quiet can be unsettling. Loving an avoidant person leaves its mark. You've spent so much time adjusting, waiting, proving your worth, that when it's finally over, you don't just miss them. You miss the fight, the chase, the cycle that, in some twisted way, made you feel alive. Because at least when you were fighting for them, you had a purpose. But now you're left with nothing but yourself. And that's where the healing begins. It starts when you stop romanticizing what you lost, when you stop replaying the good moments in your head and remind yourself of the loneliness that came with them, the uncertainty, the way you felt invisible even when they were standing right next to you. It's in those quiet realizations that you begin to reclaim your power, not by resenting them, but by recognizing that you deserve more. Healing doesn't mean you stop loving them overnight. It doesn't mean you forget the connection you shared. But it does mean accepting that love should never feel like begging for scraps. That no matter how much you wanted them to choose you, the most important thing is that you finally chose yourself. One day, without even realizing it, you'll notice the shift. The weight you've been carrying will feel lighter. The memories will lose their grip on you, You'll stop wondering if they'll come back, because deep down, you won't want them to. And when love finds you again, and it will feel nothing like this. It will be steady, secure, enough. So no, healing isn't sudden, but it's happening. With every day that you move forward, with every moment you remind yourself of your worth, with every time you resist the urge to look back, you are breaking free. And that's the real ending to this story. Not them finally realizing what they lost, but you realizing what you gained.